The empty chair at the Christmas dinner. I went back home for Christmas because my mother asked me to, and because saying no felt like leaving her alone with something she'd already been carrying too long. I hadn't been back since my brother died. 2 winters had passed, but the thought of that house in December still tightened my chest in a way I couldn't explain. It sat deep in the hills, at the end of a narrow road that dropped cell service and common sense about halfway up. Growing up there, we used to joke that sound didn't travel right. Now I think it's more accurate to say it didn't leave. I arrived the morning of Christmas Eve. The air was sharp and still, the kind of cold that makes everything feel brittle. The woods pressed close on either side of the drive, bare branches reaching toward the truck like fingers. When the house came into view, it looked smaller than I remembered, crouched against the slope with its sagging porch and smoke-stained chimney. My mother stood in the doorway waiting, bundled in a coat that used to be my brother's. Inside, the house smelled like pine cleaner and wood smoke. Familiar, but off somehow, like a place trying too hard to feel normal. We hugged, and she held on longer than usual. Her hands were cold. The first thing I noticed was the dining room. The table was set for 4. Plates, silverware, folded napkins, water glasses, everything laid out carefully, evenly spaced. There were only 3 of us now. My father had died years earlier, and my brother. I didn't let my mind finish that thought. One chair sat slightly apart from the rest, pulled back just enough to stand out if you were paying attention. It looked like someone had stood up and never returned. I reached for it without thinking, intending to push it back in. My mother's hand closed around my wrist. "Leave it," she said. Then. Her voice was calm, almost gentle, but her grip was tight. I looked at her and saw the tremor running through her fingers. She noticed me, noticing, and let go, smoothing her coat like nothing had happened. "It's fine where it is," she said. "I'll fix it later." She never did. That first night, I slept in my old room. The bed creaked when I turned, and the walls felt thinner than they should have. Wind moved through the trees outside, a low, constant sound like distant surf. I lay awake longer than I wanted to admit, listening to the house settle. Old places make noise. I knew that. Pops, groans, the occasional sharp crack as wood contracts in the cold. Still, every sound felt too deliberate. Sometime after midnight, I heard it. A scrape, slow, steady. Wood dragged across old floorboards. I sat up in bed, heart pounding, listening. The sound came again, longer this time, followed by a pause. Then another scrape. My mouth went dry. I knew that sound. I'd heard it 1,000 times growing up. Chairs being moved in the dining room, usually by my brother when he leaned back too far. I stood in the doorway, staring down the dark hall. The sound stopped. After a long moment, I reached for the light switch. The dining room was empty. The table sat exactly as it had before. The chairs were in their places. The one that had been pulled back was still pulled back, angled slightly away from the table. Nothing else was out of place. No signs of disturbance. No explanation that fit neatly enough to calm me. I told myself I'd imagined it. Grief does strange things. Being back there stirred up memories I hadn't dealt with properly. I went back to bed and lay awake until morning. The next day passed quietly. My mother moved through the house like she was afraid of waking something. She cooked, cleaned, straightened things that didn't need it. We talked about safe topics. The weather, people in town, plans I didn't intend to keep. Neither of us mentioned the chair. That evening, as dusk settled in, she began setting the table for dinner. For 4. I watched from the doorway as she placed an extra plate in front of the empty chair. She didn't hesitate, didn't acknowledge it, just set it down like it belonged there. I started to say something, then stopped. The look on her face wasn't one I wanted to interrupt. Focused, determined. Like she was following rules only she understood. We sat down to eat. The food was good, but I barely tasted it. The house felt tight, the air heavy. Every small sound, the clink of silverware, the hum of the refrigerator, seemed amplified. I became aware of the empty chair in a way that made my skin crawl. Not because it was empty, but because it didn't feel that way. Halfway through the meal, the chair moved, just an inch. The scrape was soft but unmistakable. My mother didn't look up. She didn't react at all. She took another bite, chewed slowly, and swallowed. "Don't," she said quietly. I froze, fork halfway to my mouth. "Don't look," she added. "Please." I didn't ask what she meant. I didn't look. I stared at my plate and finished my meal, with hands that shook, no matter how hard I tried to steady them. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat in the living room, with a lamp on, watching shadows shift across the walls. Around midnight, I heard the scrape again, then another, slow, measured, like someone adjusting their position. I stayed where I was. The next morning, the chair was closer to the table, not fully pushed in, just closer than it had been. I confronted my mother after breakfast, asked her what was going on, asked her why she kept setting a place for someone who wasn't there. She listened quietly, hands folded around her coffee mug. When I finished, she sighed and looked past me, toward the dining room. "He doesn't like being forgotten," she said. My stomach dropped. "Mom." She finally met my eyes. There was something in her expression I hadn't seen before. Not grief, not denial. Something steadier, more resigned. "He comes back every Christmas," she said, "just for a little while." I wanted to argue, to tell her she was wrong, that she needed help, but the words wouldn't come. I thought about the chair, the sounds, the way the house felt at night. That evening, snow started falling. Thick, quiet flakes that softened the world outside. The woods disappeared behind a white curtain. The isolation felt complete. Dinner was worse than the night before. The chair scraped closer in small increments as we ate. Each movement sent a jolt through me. My mother whispered my brother's name, once, softly, like a warning or a plea. The plate in front of the empty chair was disturbed when we finished. Food pushed around, a fork angled slightly differently than when she'd set it. I left the table as soon as I could. That night, I heard footsteps in the hall. Slow, familiar. They stopped outside my bedroom door. I held my breath, listening to the faint sound of breathing on the other side. Too close, too real. The handle didn't turn. The footsteps retreated down the hall, stopping briefly in the dining room. I heard the chair scrape again. I left the next morning. I told my mother I had to get back. Work, obligations, excuses. She nodded like she'd expected it. When I hugged her goodbye, she held on tight. Next year, she said, maybe next year will be easier. I didn't answer. She still sets that chair every Christmas. I know because I drove past the house last winter and saw the light on in the dining room, table set just the way it always was. Sometimes, when the nights get cold and quiet, I think about that chair, about how grief can take shape when it isn't allowed to leave. And I wonder if my brother comes back because he wants to, or because someone keeps making a place for him at the table.